And we are here to dialogue and see how best we can increase women participation in the political space. Here with us today to guide and moderate the discussion is Mrs. Joyce Nyame, who is a development activist and head of programs at the Youth Bridge Foundation. She's also a member of the coalition. Welcome, Joyce.
Thank you very much, Nana. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Sorry, we've let you sit for a while, but hope you be energized so that we can have the conversations and then also create context for affirmative action. Okay, so Gil, kindly join them here. So before we call Auntie Regina to give us the welcome remarks, I would like the panelists to just briefly tell us the
affirmative action bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And good morning to everyone. So my name is Sheila Minka Premo. I'm a lawyer in practice, and I'm also an activist. Currently, I'm the convener for the Affirmative Action Bill Coalition. And I'm here to talk about the need for inclusion and pluralism as far as governance and decision-making positions in Ghana is concerned. So I'll tell you the perspectives of the Affirmative Action Bill Coalition, what we are doing to ensure that we have a law in place to ensure inclusion. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raj Veer-Gill. You can call me Raj for short if that's easier. I'm from Ottawa, Canada, which is the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I am also a lawyer in my background, but right now I'm working for the Global Center for Pluralism on our reports that measure pluralism around the world. We're doing this work in 20 countries, and Ghana is one of the countries. And my background is also on gender issues. I've worked on honor-based violence in ethnocultural communities in Canada extensively, worked on anti-human trafficking in Canada as well, and now bringing some of my knowledge internationally, and I'm very much here to learn and share the findings of our report and just trying to build a way forward and see if there's any way we can support. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we can see the diversity on the table. Even though we are not seeing any male on the table, I think we just want to let people understand that maybe it's time we create some of these images so that people tend to understand why we need to have some of these women in the places that we want them to be. So we also have another important stakeholder online. I don't know if Doctor is around, maybe, no. Online, is she on? Hello, Doc. Okay, so let's go on. We have Dr. A.C. Atre-Mensah. She is a senior lecturer at the Department of Management and Human Resources at the Ghana Communications University. So she will be also bringing us a different perspective to this contest. It's important we create context in some of these discussions. So as Madam Sheila said, she will be letting us understand the context within which some of these demands are being made. Because historically, we've had this arrears that we need to make up for. So it's important we understand where we are coming from, what is happening now, so that we can forge better strategies going forward. And then from the gender ministry, also, there are different stakeholders that are involved. So if you look at the videos that we've been watching since we were waiting for the program to start, it's interesting to note that there are different people when it comes to governance. So even with the young people, we all notice the diversity in their views and even the way they express themselves. It might come across like one of them is coming aggressively, but it's important we listen and also we form certain contests in trying to demand for certain accountabilities and certain frameworks to promote some of the work that we do. So before we start, I would want to invite Auntie Regina to come and give us a brief welcome before we go into the other things. Let's give her a clap.
Thank you very much, Joyce, and good morning to you all. Our resource persons, good morning. I'm here on behalf of Professor Henry Kwesi Prempeh, who couldn't join us just because he has an equal assignment to do. So the steering committee members of the Affirmative Action Coalition, and we are privileged to have the convener herself present here, representatives of the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, political parties, representatives present here, civil society members, development partners, our media friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor to welcome you all to this roundtable discussion. On behalf of the Board of Directors, the governors and management of staff of CDD-Ghana, as my colleague said, we are 25 years old, and we've been doing this for the past 25 years. Can we say hooray to CDD? Thank you. We are very much grateful for the opportunity to collaborate with Global Center for Pluralism and the Affirmative Action Bill Coalition to again raise the need for Ghana to strengthen pluralism and inclusion of women for inclusive development. Throughout the world, several efforts have been made to address the problem of inclusion and the exclusion of other marginalized groups in society. This has been seen in legal systems, public policy frameworks, and the signing of so many international and regional charters and treaties by all countries focused on ensuring inclusive governance and development. While some progress has been made and women have broken the glass ceiling in varied fields of life, gender inequality and exclusion of women are still extensive, and inequality is still pervasive, and women and girls remain disproportionately discriminated against across social, economic, and public life. This is a barrier to sustainable development, as highlighted by the inclusion of a standalone sustainable development goal that aims to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. CDD-Ghana is therefore very much committed to the advocacy to get the Affirmative Action Bill passed into law and supports the coalition as it illustrates the country's commitment to improving governance and in securing inclusive development. In order for Ghana to achieve this goal of becoming a more inclusive state with equal opportunities for all, it is very important and urgent to address its human rights gaps. One of the human rights violations is the continuing gender imbalance within various spheres of life. In the most recent Global Gender Gap report published in December 2019, Ghana was ranked 107 out of 152 countries for the Gender Index on Political Empowerment, with a score of a mere 0.129, compared with 0.563 for Rwanda, 0.497 for South Africa, 0.427 for Ethiopia, for Uganda, and 0.238 for even Zimbabwe. The Global Center for Pluralism Monitor Assessment report has come at the right time because, again, it is stressing the need and the very urgent need for Ghana to pass an affirmative action bill into law to ensure that women are part of the decision-making processes of policies to ensure inclusive development. CDD-Ghana aims through this advocacy programs to push for the introduction and passage of the affirmative action bill because it aligns with the mission and vision of the center. We aim to promote democracy, and as we know, democracy for all of us, not for some people. One key purpose of the affirmative action bill is to increase the number of women in government and assume leadership roles. Women's political representation in Ghana has been abysmal, and all of us are witnesses to it. Women hold only 40 seats out of the 275 members in our current parliament, which represents only 14.5%. That is below the recommended threshold of 30%. This percentage is far below that of the African average of even 24%. So between 2016 and 2021, there has only been an increase of 1.5. And if this is how we're going to go, then it will take us forever to even have 30% representation in our parliament. An aspect of our campaigns at the CDD has been to continuously push for the good governance for many years. And unfortunately, as I said, we are 25 years. For the past 25 years, this is what we've been doing. And unfortunately, this development has stalled. At the moment, there is a sense of urgency, as the report reveals, and you hear more when Rajvel presents the findings, to accelerate this development. An increase of women in both government and politics will bring about more differing views, opinions, and perspectives, which will prove beneficial to the country's development. Ghana cannot be a true democracy without equal representation of all groups, especially that of women and other marginalized groups. More women in government and leadership roles will also serve as role model for future generations of young people, particularly young women. An escalation of youth participation will create room for the youth to be more involved in not only running the affairs of the nation, but also play a significant role in Ghana's quest to achieve the 2023 Sustainable Development Goals. The enactment of the bill will be a step in the right direction, as its aim will be to address the historical, social, cultural, economic, and political gender imbalance in the country and serve as a tool for justice for women in the country. There is the hope that in passing this bill and creating a more inclusive environment for both women and other marginalized groups, it will also connect with the young people, and they will no longer feel limited or restricted to participate in the development of this country. We expect that this roundtable discussion will highlight the role of all of us sitting here, especially our colleagues from the Ministry of Gender, who are supposed to champion the passage of this bill. I thank you all for coming.
Thank you very much for letting us understand the role that CDD plays in this journey, and also letting us know the figures when it comes to women participation in Ghana and across the world. So the most important thing for me in her presentation was CDD's role in facilitating some of these conversations. So CDD goes to the ground, they identify the gaps, and they raise awareness on the gaps, and they demand for better alternatives. So in demanding for better alternatives, CDD work with other people. That's why I would like to invite Madam Gloria Kankam just to come and give a brief remark on behalf of the Affirmative Action Coalition Bill in their role with CDD in this journey. Let's welcome her.
Thank you, Joyce. And thank you, everyone. We've been sitting for too long, so I'm sure I'll just be brief. So I'm giving this brief remarks on behalf of Dr. Charity Binka, a member of the steering committee of the AA Bill Coalition. So this coalition is the Affirmative Action Gender Equality Bill. And that gender equality is very important. So we launched ourselves in September 2019. So come September will be 4 years. And you need to come along 4 years of a coalition and still the bill not passed. It's a very dangerous ground, isn't it? And we launched it because doing it in silos as individual organizations, we didn't have a stronger voice. So we needed to have a stronger voice to be more impactful. The journey has not been easy, though. It's been back and forth. And who is to blame? Maybe Ghana. Why? Because within this short period of 6 years, 7 years, we have had 4 ministers in the gender ministry. And the gender ministry is the key stakeholder in this process. We have other key stakeholders, but it's the #1 key stakeholder. And that has not worked for us. And again, because we have been kicked off from the cabinet, we no longer sit on cabinet. It's a very dangerous thing. And journalists here, please, whilst we are writing, please let that thing appear in it. We need to return back to cabinet. So we'll say that the process has not been easy, but not because, again, Ghana has a lot of commitment to international obligations, regional obligations. International level, we have the CEDAW. At the regional level, we have the Maputo Protocol. At the ECOWAS level, we have the ECOWAS Supplementary Act. All of it, we have appended our signature. Maputo Protocol, Ghana appended signature without reservation. Again, that's a very dangerous thing because that doesn't mean we understood everything. Was it okay, or is it because it was the other gender? No. These are some of the things. So I'm glad CDD is joining forces with the Affirmative Action Gender Equality Coalition and also with other stakeholders, especially the media. You have a stronger voice in here so that hopefully, I hope this year we have to pass this bill. If we don't pass it bill there, I don't know, 2020 to 2024, women will fold their arms, won't join the process of the election anymore. So we want to thank CDD for joining forces with us and all other stakeholders and ensuring that inclusive governance, inclusive development is a gender issue and it matters. And we need to all bring our voices on board so that we get this process passed. We thank CDD for their collaboration and hope that it will be mutually beneficial to all of us and most importantly to Ghana, our motherland. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Gloria. And then one important note to her remark is the fact that this conversation is not just going to benefit the women. So Madam Regina noted that if we need to have a sustainable development, there is a need for inclusion. And then if we have inclusion in our development agendas and strategies and whatever you want to call it, it creates a better roadmap for the young people. So if, as a nation, we want to leave a legacy, let's think through having inclusion. And then also, I took note of what Gloria mentioned about the need for partnerships. It's not just one. So it's important that we don't see the fight for the passage of the Affirmative Action Bill as something that only the coalition is fighting for. And we see gurus like the CDD also supporting some of these fights. It's very important, and the media here, don't just create the narratives that this is a women issue. I mean, if it's a women issue, apart from the fact that we form the majority of the population of the country, it's not just a women issue. It's an integral part of development. We are looking at development that can stay for long. We are looking at development that, let's say, our kids can come and enjoy. So if it's not inclusive, it's not sustainable. That's why these conversations are coming up. So talking about some of these relevant partnership and stakeholders we need to work with in trying to create this path and in trying to create this context for the passage of the bill. We have Rajville, who will be giving us a presentation of some of the findings from the global assessment on the discussion, this discussion. So there is a need for us to understand, as I said earlier on, the context, the historical background, where we are coming from. And then Madam Regina mentioned that CDD, what CDD does is to make sure that they provide the statistics so that they raise consciousness. People are just alarmed and say, oh, should we do this? Yes, we need to do this, but these are the findings. So we watch a short video on what we will be having by the next presenter before we delve into the stats that we want to discuss now. Please, the video.
range of approaches and tools. We need to support pluralism and to start designing, implementing, and learning from projects for sustained impact. That's why CSM Stand is investing in pluralism as a strategy for strengthening democracy, rights, and governance. CSM Stand is committed to sharing what we learn about designing and implementing for pluralism. Find out what you can do to support pluralistic communities. Join us. Be part of this movement to build prosperous and just societies.
Thank you very much. So I think the video is.
And then, as the video said, some of the blocks of what we'll be hearing is about recognition and belonging, and how we need to look at diversity as an asset. So I know there are diverse opinions here that you would want to share with us. We will come back to you later in the program. Let's just understand the broader context within which we want to situate this conversation. So kindly keep your diversity, whatever you want to share with us in terms of this, but try to be open-minded and understand the context within which we want to have this conversation. So I would like to invite Razville to give us her presentation.
Thank you so much. I hope the video gave a good broad overview of what pluralism is. I know that we all know what diversity and inclusion is, and we work in these spaces, but sometimes the concept and that word that we use can be a bit, I guess, exclusionary sometimes if it does appear to be abstract. So I hope that gave it just a nice introduction to it, and it sets the stage for the rest of my presentation as I explain what our Global Pluralism Monitor is. So I'll just start for the next slide. It's just a brief introduction into our organization. I'll just wait for the next slide. I'll let everybody get set up here. Is that one? Yes. I think there was, okay, there might not have been, is there another slide right after the title page on the GCP, or is it? We can just, yeah, we can go to the free, we'll just stop right there, but I'll just give a general overview of what the Global Center for Pluralism is. We were started in 2012 by His Highness the Aga Khan, and in participation and partnership with the Government of Canada. We are based in Canada, but we do consider ourselves an international organization based in Canada. However, obviously, when we come into these spaces around the world, we do recognize we are outsiders to this space, and we want to thank you for allowing us to speak with you today and share the results of the report. We'd also like to say thank you to CDD-Ghana for giving us this platform for us to be able to share the work that we've been doing over the last few years. So just to give, I'm not going to repeat everything that the video said, but when we look at pluralism, we know that a lot of people think of this concept as diversity and inclusion, but we believe pluralism is the action behind that. So what do you do as a society to ensure that diversity and inclusion is respected, is supported, and is honestly embedded into the society for the long term? So we do look at pluralism as the recognition of diversity, whether that be in the institutions, in your government, in your laws, in your judicial system, and then to take that further into the societal attitudes. And societal attitudes, we know, can be influenced by media, can be influenced by social programs that bring different groups together, the civil society organization, nonprofits. So there are a lot of different factors, because we know that there can be really great laws, and then honestly, if there's things that are so entrenched in a society that keep divisions, those laws aren't gonna mean anything. So it's really twofold. We see the hardware part, and then we see the software part, which we believe is like the societal response and the attitudes and the cultural changes. And belonging also is an aspect of the report, and pluralism that we feel like is something very nuanced, and sometimes people don't look at and when they talk about what's happening in a society, because I think how we feel we belong in a society is very important. I spoke about this on Tuesday, but myself, I'm a child of immigrants. I feel very Canadian, but I also have my Indian background too, so it's always just this, how am I seen as a Canadian even though I have brown skin? Sometimes you can feel like an outsider even though I was born there, I live there, I feel very Canadian, but you know, when push comes to shove and there's politicians who are talking about certain narratives, sometimes you can doubt your place in society, which is unfortunate. We can move to the next slide. So what is this monitor? So we're talking about pluralism. We've been talking about it at the center for so long, and we're like, okay, so how do we introduce this concept to the world, make it more mainstream? And also, how do we understand it and show what it's like in different countries? So we decided, and it was basically a years-long project with academics and people working in this field to develop a framework. And they wanted to develop a tool that would look at a country over, and I'll go into what the monitor looks like, but they wanted to develop a tool that would give us results that would say, okay, here's a good overview, here's a roadmap, here's the institutional map of where we could see some gaps, some barriers, and some opportunities to address some of these issues that are happening. No country is perfect. We've done this in 20 countries. Nobody gets a 10 out of 10. We do have some scores, so yes, even Canada itself portrays ourselves as a multicultural country. We did an assessment in our country that's so far from the truth. Unfortunately. And so I think that it's just very important to know that there is always opportunity, and framing it this way, we hope, would provide, you know, NGO spaces, individuals, and governments, you know, some easy wins, some on-ramps to make some policy change that could then be taken into society and change attitudes. Okay, I think it might be a wrong presentation, but I will still, but I can still talk about some of this. So this is where we actually are in all of the countries around the world. So as you can see, we're in different countries on the continent. We've done Australia, Malaysia, Indonesia, South Korea. We've really tried to this initial set of 20. We really hope to have a good representation across the board with the resources that we had, and just to represent different types of government systems, you know, global north, global south, if you use those terms. And beforehand, we have done some engagement in country work in Colombia. So that's been a really fruitful process. We've been there for the last 6 months, and we hope to continue. Ghana is our second country, and we hope to be starting programming soon in Sri Lanka, Malaysia, possibly coming back to the continent, South Africa, and maybe, and in Jordan. So again, there's lots of work to be done, and hopefully we can keep you updated as we do more work across the world. We can go into the next slide, but I think, okay, this is, there's a presentation that I sent. It's a different document file. Do you have, it's on the USB drive, maybe I just don't want to communicate the wrong information. Although if you want to learn about Colombia, I can tell you what we found in the Colombia report too, which was very interesting. Okay, perfect. So, yeah, this should be the good. So why, again, what I mentioned about the monitor and why we find that it's useful is that we believe that in the framework we can identify gaps in either laws or in societal attitudes that could be addressed possibly, and developing a plan of action based on those gaps that we discover. We can also discover trends in the way that we present the information and the way we analyze it. And we hope that whatever information that we do come across can help in conflict prevention, early detection of issues that come across, because again, we're hopefully giving a new lens on which to look at these issues. So we're hoping that that would, you know, lend itself to trend spotting, to issue spotting, and hopefully conflict prevention and best practices. So hopefully, you know, this is not an indictment on a country or criticism of a country. It's really just trying to provide an objective lens from secondary research that's already out there, and to, again, set this snapshot and this national, like, top view of what's happening in a country. So there are obviously good things happening in a country too. There are best practices that could be even, I guess, furthered or shared, and even across the countries. When we release these 20 reports, you can see there's learning between countries that can happen. I know, for instance, in Canada, the Colombian Indigenous people we met were so interested in meeting the Canadian Indigenous people and talking about setting up a global network and talking about their initiatives around self-governance. And so really we are very honored that this is actually opening the conversation between groups. And hopefully as we expand our work, we can connect some civil societies, NGOs, and governments in Ghana to other countries that you're interested in. You can go on to the next slide. How do we assess it? So we can go into, I'll show you the steps on which we take, which is on the next slide. So this is what we do is we hire what we call 2 assessors and 1 reviewer to write these reports. We hire or we recruit assessors who are from the country, who are experts in these issues around diversity and inclusion. And it's up to them, and we do really give them a lot of the independence to take the lead in what groups they choose to analyze in our framework. And then from there, they get to apply it. So we have the 2 assessors, they do their own studies. They basically do it separately so they can come together again and then share what they have and have a bit more of, I guess, again, diversity in what they present at the end. And then they have a reviewer who then reconciles all the information, where they discuss scores, if they have some disagreements, and then they consolidate that into the final report. We have kept the authors anonymized because of safety reasons in certain countries. The Canadian authors are public because they were part of our pilot process, and those terms were a bit different. But I can tell you that the people who wrote the Ghana reports backgrounds were in academia, in gender issues, in diversity issues, and we do reference checks. We get really good references, and we do ensure that the people who are writing these reports, we hope, represent, a very reputable stake in it and opinion. So we are very much very lucky to have had these assessors work on this report. So after they've chosen their diversity type. So in Ghana, they've chosen migrant groups. They chose the regional divide between North and South. There were ethnic groups and religious groups. So they would take those 4 different diversity types. They would apply the framework, and I'll show you that in the next slide. And they would score each framework and each indicator. So the scores go between 1 to 10. And I know scores are very easy to look at and you can come to conclusions, but we're not using the scores to rank against other countries. You're being scored against yourself, basically. And so we're hoping that this would be the first score, and then you'd revisit this in a few years and see if you've improved or if you haven't improved, and to go from there. But also, we also have a narrative explanation. So there's a qualitative part of this study too, where the assessors explain how they came to this score. And again, this is not the final word. These are the opinions of these researchers. So we are very cognizant when we come into spaces like this. You might not agree with the scores, and we don't want you to agree with the scores. But again, this is the starting point of a national level study, and we can take it regionally. We can discuss why the scores work or they do not, and we're very open to that interpretation. And the next steps, and why I'm here today, is the engagement part. We really wanted a report that wasn't another document that maybe goes unread, or a Western or outside organization coming and telling you things you already know about better than us, or how any of us ever will. We wanted to see if we could take the resources that we had and say, okay, this is the report. How would this be useful to you in your work, especially to those members of NGOs and CSOs?
Organizations such as CDD, and in Colombia we had another human rights organization, and instead, is there anything of interest to you in this report? Would this report help you in any way, like say partnerships, convening, even getting media attention on the issue? And is the framework even useful for you? And we did get really good positive feedback so far. And in Colombia, we had meetings with social leaders, with Afro-Colombians and indigenous communities in the Pacific and the Caribbean, where they took our framework and applied it to their own communities and developed their own scores, and said it was very helpful for them to then advocate for their communities to Bogota and the capital. We can go on to the next slide. So this is the framework that we keep talking about.
So basically
we're looking at this framework, thinking to ourselves, so how do we know if a country is pluralistic?
And we decide,
or the researchers have decided, that the best way to measure this, or to really
country is at, is to look at these 5 dimensions. So the commitments. So you would look into Ghana's international commitments, and we've all discussed it earlier this week about how Ghana has signed many treaties on protecting the rights of many different groups. And that is very obviously promising, but again, on the next step, we'll see implementation, it might be a different story. And then national commitments, you would look at such things such as the Constitution. And again, we know that Ghana has some very strong guarantees of human rights in their Constitution. And inclusive citizenship, I know that's not open to everyone and there is some debate, but there are some parts of the citizenship laws that are very inclusive in Ghana as well. And then, so you'd probably see that they would score very high. I think Ghana did score very high. I think they got a 9 in international commitments and looking at the Constitution, so very high on those scores for all groups. So they would look at the groups and be like, okay, so how does this work for religious groups? Okay, they did sign this convention to protect religious minorities. Okay, national commitments. Okay, they are allowed to practice their religions. Okay, that's a high score. But then when you go into the practices dimension, you want to see how any of those international commitments are domesticated into your laws. Are they reporting on time? Are they actually adhering to the conventions that they have signed on to? And then you'll see in national commitments, you'll see, okay, so we have money for this ministry. We do have a Ministry of Gender. But how much money goes to the Ministry of Gender? How much resources do they have to actually do their work? How much power do they have to even make their own decisions or implement some policies? And again, there can be a disconnect there, and that's what we found. And when you look at data collection is really important because it does signal what a society wants to bring to light and what they are prioritizing, and also gives us information on diversity groups. So if you're doing a census of a country and they're not even looking at one minority group, that tells you a lot. It tells you we can't measure what's happening to that group. Maybe then it's not a priority of a government or society. So it gives you a lot of indication. And we've found through a lot of our research now that we've pinpointed areas of data collection that could help people working in these spaces. Leadership, we find, is another real good indicator of what's happening for diverse groups in a country. So you look at political parties. Are there ethnic minorities in political parties? Are there ethnic minority or religious minority political parties in a country? Because that is really dependent. That's it's an indicator of how inclusive a country is. I know that in Canada, we do have a lot of minority representatives, so people from like the Indian community, Black communities, like who identify as people of color and religious minorities as well. So that would be a good indicator if you're looking at it from. And we also have, which is promising, a first person of color, religious minority, federal political party leader, which was a big thing. And the news media, this is so important. When you look at the news media and you scan it and you see how does the media talk about these diverse groups? So how does the media, the national media talk about, let's say, for instance, Muslims or Christians or women? So when you look at how the news media is portraying a certain group, you can kind of get a temperature of what's happening in the society and also what's being reiterated. And then you also look at who's supporting those media channels. And I think we find throughout a lot of different countries, the national medias, those big media channels, unfortunately sometimes are not the biggest champions of inclusion and diversity. Civil society. When we look at a country that has a strong civil society, we find that it's probably the best place for people to be fighting for their rights and for diverse and minority groups, because as we know in the spaces, the NGOs and CSOs are doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this work, and the more they are able to operate, to get funding, and are able to operate without government interference is a good sign for diversity. And private sector can be things like how many do the big companies hire people from minority groups or diverse groups? Are women in management levels? Are certain people from certain regions not employed in certain places? So private sector can also give you an indication. So for Sri Lanka, Sinhalese majority, they usually make up all the government positions. And so Tamil minorities, they don't get into government spaces, and government workers get good jobs, pensions, good pay. And so that really changes the fragments of your society's structure and shows that there's very much like have-nots and the haves who are up there in those government jobs. And then look at the groups that we're looking at and then seeing how are they faring politically, economically, socially, culturally, and do they have access to justice? So I'll give an example for the one diversity group here in Ghana. We were looking at the North and South divide, and unfortunately they found that in the North, they're still really lagging behind the South in terms of economic conditions, social conditions, access to education and healthcare, and also access to justice. We had a really good comment on Tuesday about, I think it's a problem throughout the country, about not having access to justice and the legal system being very hard to get into. Lawyers are expensive, the system is very hard to understand at a lot of the time. So I think that's across all groups that we found that. And lastly, when we look at a country to see how safe it is for diverse groups or how pluralistic it is, we want to see, like, are groups fighting each other? Do groups trust each other? Do groups trust their government, that they have to obey their laws? Do they trust their institutions or police and move on from there? How much are they included and accepted in society, and how much do they feel like they're a part of society? And from there, we just develop recommendations, which are, again, just recommendations, and we are doing this process to get feedback from people who are actually living here and working on these issues. So I'm gonna kind of speed through this because I want to go to our actual findings, but I really did want to show you kind of how it is in practice of what the assessors do. So let's say for that second dimension, when they're trying to figure out if policies are being implemented, they would see that, okay, let's look at this, they would choose a law, and then say the affirmative action bill, they would say, okay, has it been implemented? No. Okay, there we go, 5, or you know what I mean? And then they would move on. So it honestly becomes a very almost technical process when you start to segment it by the group that you're looking at, the particular issue and legal commitment, and then you can score it. So we can go on to the next slide. So as I said, the scores go between 1 to 10. And so if we're looking at a particular law, then they would see, oh, okay, this is doing really well, or this is not doing very well. So, and these are the questions that they would look at. So are those legal commitments realized? I'll give you an example. So there's land rights guaranteed to indigenous people in the Colombian Constitution, for instance. And they have that, but there's no funding for them to be able to get that, those land rights, and to be able to develop that land. There are no monitoring bodies to ensure that they get the land that they were promised, so nothing happens. And it's not enforced equally and fairly because there's no government will to enforce this. So we'll go on to the next slide. And again, media, as I spoke about, like if they're looking at it in the framework, you would look and do a scan of media and look for each group. So in Canada, for instance, they would say, how are Muslims portrayed in the media? And they would look at our national news network. They would look at our newspapers. They would look at the conservative media, the liberal media, and then they would be able to get an indication for that group of where they would want to score. So we can go on to the next slide. And so you could see there, so there are some things, I'll give an example for Canada, that are changing. Now they're creating or putting resources into developing news stations and news channels and actual just television channels for Indigenous groups. The CBC is trying to combat anti-Black racism in Canada with Being Black in Canada, which is a new CBC, which is Canadian Broadcasting Corporation project. So when we see that, we're like, okay, they're making strides, but if the majority of coverage still has a way to go, maybe they would get a 5. So that's basically how we come to some of these scores. And we can go on to the next one. Okay, we can skip past the engagement part of this. I think on the other presentation, I did have the findings of the Ghana report in the infographic. Yeah, right there, perfect. So after all of this talking about the report and how we came to it, I'm going to share with you the main findings that our assessors came to. And I think, again, a lot of these facts will be known. This is a secondary research project. So the assessors did take information existing from the government, NGOs, CSOs, and other forms. So this isn't primary research yet. So for instance, we obviously have an issue, and there is an issue in Ghana with the representation of women in Parliament and also on the city level, with a very low score in terms of 14.5% of women are represented, and that's lower than the recent average given by the UN. We have found in the analysis of the framework that women and girls from the North are especially vulnerable to economic exploitation when coming to the South, and in terms of the types of jobs that they are able to get, and also their status in access to education and healthcare and economic opportunities. So a lot of the findings have found that there are really great bases in Ghanaian society and government for working on issues. However, so we have the ministries that look at gender and families, and however, there is the need for more investment that they found in order for the ministry to do their jobs. There is implementation issues for priority issues for a government, unfortunately. If you're always responding to risks, or you're not able to devote your time to the transformational change that needs to happen, which takes a long time, which takes resources, which makes people uncomfortable. And unfortunately, in the report, they're finding that the ministry is not able to be doing that at this time. They are also looking at the inequalities, not just in government, but also within management and in businesses and on boards. For the representation of women is very low in those respects, especially for women from different backgrounds from the North especially. And also the findings were that, okay, it's great that Ghana has signed on to a lot of these international commitments. However, sometimes the monitoring isn't done in time or properly. Many of the findings that the government may give that make the country come in a more positive light is then contradicted by what NGOs and CSOs say is actually happening. So there's definitely a disconnect there. And so there is a need, the report finds there's a need for a prioritization of resources and political will to some of these issues, because the base is there, the constitution is there, the ministries are there. However, there needs to be money behind that, investment behind that, and patience behind it as well. And again, the affirmative action bill was really pointed as a positive, but obviously a point of improvement in considering that it's still a bill and it hasn't been passed, and there is obviously feedback from women's groups and people involved in the process that they want some things changed, and there is still some work to be done. So the report identified this as a very much a positive that it exists, negative in the sense that it hasn't been passed yet, and wanting to move that forward. We spoke about this on Tuesday about well, why do you need the laws, right? I think laws give especially government, then more of the power and more of the stability and assurance that they can maybe move forward on things and push things a bit. So law sets the framework and that grounding that you need in order to change those societal attitudes and to make those changes in people's lives. So it might just seem like a bill is something on a piece of paper, but there's a reason why everyone's fighting so hard and people are still wanting this bill passed, because it really does give support and strength to the movement in general. And so yeah, another area of improvement that they identified in the report was just better coordination between the ministries that are working together, especially the ones that are focusing on gender, and through the cities as well and the district assemblies. And how that happens, again, is up to people who are working in these these sectors. But there has been found that because there isn't a coordination, getting to the results that you want has been more difficult than it would have been if there was more communication between these groups, working together and not operating in silos, which a lot of our sectors are very guilty of doing. Okay, we can go. Okay, and that is everything. Thank you very much. I feel like I was lecturing, but I really appreciate your time and attention. I'm very much looking forward to your thoughts in the discussion part of the program. And again, please feel free to provide any feedback or criticism or anything else, because we're definitely here to learn and looking forward to speaking more later in the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's just keep it. So before we go to the item on the program, we are talking about inclusion, we are talking about diversity. So we know that there are people who would want to be here to join us, but they are not here. So we see that there are others joining us on Zoom, and there are others joining us on Facebook. So we would want everyone here to just subscribe to our YouTube channel now, so that people will know that we are in this room doing this, and then we appreciate their support. So kindly, if you go to YouTube, you look out for Ghana Center for Democratic Development. That is our YouTube channel. And then if you go to Twitter, you look out for us at CDD-GHA, CDD Ghana, but CDD-GHA. And then if you're on Facebook, just look out for us, CDD Ghana. Instagram is CDD-Ghana. Maybe we'll just get a sheet and write these just to remind people. Nana, can you write the handle so that we keep So as much as we are looking at representation of women in some of these spaces, we should as well be mindful of the need to create more conducive platforms for the participation of women. So if Dr. A.C. Atre is ready, we'd want to take care on how we can strengthen them. I'm trying hard not to use the concepts, because one of the things as a student I've come to appreciate and acknowledge is the fact that we tend to hold on to some of these theoretical ideals, and then we lose the softwares. What was considered in trying to come to that tool, the tool for us to measure the diversity, the tool for us to measure how inclusive we are as a people? If you don't understand our attitudes, if you don't understand our culture, so for instance, there are spaces where women might not even vote for women to be in certain spaces. Why? Because of certain cultural assumptions, certain perceptions. I mean, what as people growing up, what you've come to appreciate as what really is women empowerment? What really do we want to see when we are talking about parity in terms of women participation? So I feel one of the things that we need to really align to in this room is the need for us to understand the context. It's important so that as we try to engage and have a meaningful conversation in shaping this conversation we are having, we don't have parallel ideas, but we are all on the same roadmap. So if Doctor is ready, we would have to get her take on how the 14.0% of women representation in our current parliament is not helping us to promote and advance inclusion and diversity. Hello, Doc. Hello, Dr. AC. Doc, please, we can't hear you. But we can read your text. Hello, Doc. Okay, so I think the team will try and see what's happening with our online platform. And then these are some of the things that come up with trying to be inclusive and diverse. So the same way we want to appreciate everyone in a certain context, there are certain hitches that we need to prepare ourselves for.
Northern parts of Ghana. So, I mean, sometimes, I don't know, when you look at it in terms of regional, it can be very challenging because apart from I think that in Ghana, I think apart from the northern regions, then the central region also has very poor in terms of the data, statistics, etc. But I was just wondering about the rural, urban, and then the
morning to talk about things that are important for not just women, but for the whole country. My name is AC Atre Mensah. I'm an academic, and I just want to go through some of the interesting points and gaps that I noticed going through the report and discuss some of the implications I feel it will have for the passage of the affirmative bill action. Right. So I have a little presentation I want us to go through. We know that Ghana has adopted so many commitments and treaties has been signed and ratified. We have a Ministry of Gender and Children, Social Protection in accordance with the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And then our Constitution recognizes and protects all social and cultural groups, including women, from discrimination. However, we have a huge problem with implementation and a problem of lack of representation of women, especially in leadership. And when I say leadership, I don't just mean only political leadership, but leadership across all sectors of society, including economic and in other social spheres. Implementation of women's rights is challenged by a lack of political commitment and resources. And we know that there is a cultural element to all these things. In Ghana, gender equality and women empowerment is limited by traditional cultural and social norms. And these have gone on to perpetuate discrimination and unequal treatment. So, as I indicated earlier, we have a problem of low participation, and this is what's highlighted by the report. Now, just to give us a background, the report indicated issues of unequal access to education and healthcare. It also reported issues of socioeconomic nature, issues with low intergroup trust, as well as trust of institutions due to historical evidence and experience. And that in particular, women continue to be victims of practices that limit their access to property rights such as land, which further deepen the lack of representation. Female leadership and representation across all sectors of society continues to be a problem. And I feel that this is a reinforcing cycle, meaning that because females are not adequately represented in politics, in economic spaces, in media, in academia, it affects the progression of women in these spaces and overall affects the gender parity, and then also affects our ability to pass legislation and rules that actually protect women. So there's a self-reinforcing cycle here. For example, the report noted that in media, women don't stay in the profession long enough to rise to managerial or executive positions. And one of the reasons I prefer for this finding is that women have the care of duty for family, for nurturing, for child bringing and nurturing. We are the ones who have at some point to make that difficult decision of choosing between your career and choosing between your family. And most often than not, because society expects women to choose their families, and also because of practical realities, on the ground, women are forced to choose their families over their careers. And so that also results in the underrepresentation of women in leadership, because if people in the workforce are up for promotion and there are only 10 men who qualify to begin with, then the leadership position will be chosen from that group of 10 men. So, it's interesting, but it's a sad state of affairs, because the structure and the setup of the Ghanaian economic space, in the political space, may not be quote unquote intentional to push or suppress women, but the way these systems have been set up needs to be looked at And the reason, and so this also reinforces why we actually need a bill, so that we push for quotas for women, and we recognize the differential needs of women and restructure these spaces and environments to accommodate the needs of women, so that they would not have to choose between their careers and their families, because it's an unfair choice to expect women to make, because men are not faced with those same choices, or not faced with those same choices in the same magnitude or extent. In areas where women do get through and break the glass ceiling, as Regina was talking about, we have instances where women are chosen as tokens. And research has identified what we call the glass cliff effect, where they say, okay, just to obey the quota, we'll put you there, but we make your life so miserable that you will quit on your own. And so these are other subtle nuanced areas and issues where, covertly, women are facing challenges in aspiring to getting into leadership positions and staying in those leadership positions. And the report also noted that there are limited decision-making opportunities for women and fewer opportunities for advancement of their careers. And this is a myriad of several issues, including the ones I just spoke about. We know that the media is one of the most powerful tools for social reform. And the report found that in media discussions of gender-related issues, such as, reportage on violence against women, etc., they do not connect those happenings to the wider social context that is enabling these behaviors. So in a sense, we need to find a way of changing how we are socialized, so that society now becomes very conscious and aware of its role in perpetuating some of these things. And that also means that the affirmative bill, the affirmative action bill must have within itself educational, monitoring, and advocacy in order to change the wider societal context, because we are a reflection of our society. What pertains to society as acceptable is what goes around the whole society. So we actually need to look at that critically, and through advocacy and through education, fix that aspect, as much as can be possible. And the media have a huge role to play in that regard. The report also highlighted that more women are in informal and vulnerable employment more than men. And one implication also of that is that women now can easily become unemployed and become more vulnerable. There are issues with regulation in informal work, in the informal sector, which affects both men and women, but disproportionately affects women because more women are in the informal sectors. For example, pensions. I know that the government has national health for pregnant women, all right? But aside pregnancy, women have unique health needs that must be considered. These health needs are reproductive in nature, and even with childbearing, so far what we have takes care of women when they are pregnant. But we know that there are issues with women with menstrual hygiene, menstrual health. We have issues with postpartum issues that seem to be very neglected. There are mental health issues tied to postpartum issues that we are not talking about and we are not conscious of. And all these things have implications for how long a woman can stay in an economic sphere, even whether it's formal or informal. And so at the end of the day, women seem to be more disadvantaged. And systematically, there's a disparity in earnings for men and women. While this is a global picture across the world, women tend to earn less than men for the same job with the same qualification. And so that needs to be fixed. But in a Ghanaian context, we also need to look at this. There are other issues pertaining from our culture and religion, which affects trust. And so the report, it talks about cultural inequality that cuts across all the ethnic groups, cultural practices that disadvantage women, inheritance laws that remove economic agency from the hands of women. In some societies, women cannot pass on property to their daughters. And so this sets us up for the state of affairs that we have currently. And because of the kind of experiences that women have had, there's a general distrust of both formal and informal institutions in the country. And that doesn't surprise me at all, because, by experience and by experience of others, women in Ghana have learned not to trust institutions. And so that means that institutions must do better. Institutions like regulators like the police, and I'm not just mentioning them to pick on them, but there's a need for us to be intentional, that's the word, intentional about creating trust of women in these institutions. And these institutions must undergo systematic, I don't want to use the word re-education, but we must all become advocates. But before we become advocates, we must know what is happening, we must understand the implications, and by understanding, behavioral change and psyche change can occur. And so that really would help the matters at hand. And the report also noted that women have a higher participation in religious groups. Again, everybody who is Ghanaian will identify with this. But the implication, I feel, is that religious groups and religious leaders are important gatekeepers in pushing for the affirmative action bill. And so these groups of people must be won over, and they must be important stakeholders in these conversations. As already highlighted, there's a north-south divide. And so people in northern Ghana are disproportionately poorer when it comes to income poverty. There's a lower investment in the north as compared to the south. Rural areas in northern Ghana are at risk, and women in rural northern Ghana are most at risk. So, for example, if you take a look at this diagram, the issue of the intersectionalities. So if a woman comes from the rural north, is uneducated, has a disability, or is a migrant, she is the most vulnerable per the report. And this reflects, the literature when we look at vulnerabilities. Now we know that because of these vulnerabilities, most young adolescent women are pushed to seek greener pastures, as it were, through economic migration. But that doesn't help either, because then they come and settle down in the slums in the south, and they experience other forms of vulnerability and violence. And so the protection of the young migrant woman from the north who doesn't have so much education must be a conscious point for advocacy, a conscious point for CSOs to look at. I know that many efforts have been made in these spaces. We have policies, we have initiatives, CDD-Ghana and other women coalition groups, Abantu, other organizations, including donor organizations, have done a lot of work in these spaces and advocating for women's rights. But unfortunately, it looks like if we try and sort of make a lot of noise about these issues, there's a tendency for the state to label advocacy groups as partisan, and that is extremely problematic. That shuts down the door in terms of negotiation, and that, I feel, is one of the main reasons why the bill has not passed since 2011, because governments don't want to come across as being, they feel that these groups make them look bad Okay, so that there's a troubling disregard for the sense that so far as you are raising pertinent issues that are affecting Ghanaians, you are trying to make the government unpopular. And this is one area that has affected how the rate at which the bill has stagnated. Another point of interest for me from the report is about the state of active citizenship, the fact that Ghanaians are not prepared to hold public officials accountable. We talk about issues of corruption, inequality. We talk about it on the radio, on the TV, and within a week or less, we are done. We just talk and we don't take the proactive steps to make institutions and officials accountable. And I think that this is a confluence, this is as a result of the confluence of some things. One, Ghana is, we are a collectivist society. And when I say we are collectivist, it means that we are in a society where group conformity is important and individualism is frowned upon. Okay? We are also high power distance. That means that we don't question inequality. We are in a society where authorities must be obeyed. So, for example, we associate wisdom with age, and so you don't question your elders. You don't speak back to your elders. And so we are socialized in this way. If we look at the work of Professor Garrett Hofstede, he talks about, he has studied cultures for more than 30 years and has developed a skill which we call the Hofstede cultural dimensions, right? And Ghana ranks very high when it comes to power distance, 80%, right? We are very low on individualism. We are mid-range on masculinity. What does this mean? This means that we actually expect that power is distributed unequally. And so more powerful members of society naturally control, should be naturally controlled too, all right? There are pros of having such respect for authority and our elders. But the implication is that because we expect this hierarchy and because we expect inequalities, we don't have any issues with inequalities, it is showing up in how we treat diverse groups. And it's showing up in how women who we think are secondary to men, not because they are less human, but we think that that is the natural order of things. We expect women to be more subservient. And so it shows up in how women are underrepresented in politics. It shows up in how women are underrepresented in all aspects of society, because unconsciously that is how the national psyche is. And we value conformity. We are collectivists. So, the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. So we will not go and protest if we think something is wrong, because in a deep part of our subconscious, we think that, we don't talk ill about the government. You don't disrespect them. All right? The Afrobarometer report found that people are not, interested or actively participating in protests and marches, even though we have constitutionally mandated rights to do so. So, what are the implications of all these for the affirmative action bill? We know that it's not been passed despite ongoing advocacy since 2011. We know that the 40% threshold that we desire for women in parliament and women in political spaces is yet to be reached. We are only at 14.5%. And whilst this, I feel that first of all, this is a telltale signal that there's a problem. It also tells us that more advocacy is needed. But I feel that the way in which we do the advocacy must change or must be enhanced, not change, but must be enhanced if we want to see the solutions and if we want to see this bill being passed in the lifetime of people who started work on this as far back as the 80s. So the affirmative action bill is not saying that men are less important in the society. It's not saying that we don't need men. But it's just saying that we must be conscious of what the differing needs of women are in our society and make intentional actions towards bringing women up various aspects and within the gaps and spaces that we have identified. All right. So what are some of the implications. One, the bill is not passing because there are not enough women in parliament to pass it in the first place. So by rule of statistics, women are in the minority in parliament. And because men might not identify with the experiences and the needs that the bill seeks to address, they might not see it in the hierarchy of things that must be done in parliament. Somebody has, I think I did a few interviews some time back, and somebody mentioned that we have better fish to fry. We have more pressing issues to deal with. Poverty is on the rise, etc. And I told him that, don't you think that high rates of poverty are directly linked to the underrepresentation of women? And he was quiet for a bit. And so in a conversation, we both realized that we are not able to see the linkage between women empowerment, gender parity, and economic development. We talk about it in the classroom, but the layman on the street has no concept. Not that they don't have a conceptualization, but they have not sat down to think through that there's actually a link. But research globally tells us that more women in the workforce, gender parity helps to increase outcomes for countries and has implications for GDP. GDP actually goes up, not down. And so I think that the economic motivator, the economic driver, the fact that you tell the ordinary person on the streets, if we pass this bill and put in the provisions that this bill has, it's actually going to make your life better. It's not just about the women, right? Number two, this also means that if the bill is to pass within the current dispensation, we need to get men as champions, in addition to the women advocates. So, based on the previous points, we don't have enough women to get this to pass. And so it means that we must win over the men in some way. And then our efforts at advocacy must also be multi-layered. We need to attack this from different angles, from the top down, the bottom up. In terms of advocacy, for example, I feel that breaking and distilling the provisions of the bill and what it will do using our local language is important. I know that the NCC is under-resourced. The report pointed that out, so that needs to be fixed. But we can use the classrooms. We can use the social media spaces. We can use the media and the public domain to break down to the public what it actually means for us to have affirmative action. What are the benefits? What are the concrete benefits? And show and demonstrate with examples, countries or cases where affirmative action has led to improved outcome for the whole society. Further, there should be accessibility of the documentation. So this is a bill we're trying to pass since 2011. The bill should be, quote unquote, everything. As much of the bill that can be shared with the public in local languages, in visual, documentary form, in audio form, in text form, in infographics. We need to make these attempts to get people, the general public, to understand and to be on our side. And even if, or when, let me say even, when the bill actually passes, we must remember that it cannot be left on its own. Passage of the bill will not translate into enforcement of the bill. I know that the bill has innate provisions for monitoring and for reporting and etc. And so we must break this down to the local level. We must break it down to the level that the northern migrants, the northern rural migrants can understand, people in a community can understand and appreciate what it means to have affirmative action. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I feel very strongly about these things, and I'm grateful to the GPM. They've done an amazing job of highlighting some of these issues, and also to CDD for their ongoing work for the last 25 years in promoting for gender parity in Ghana. Thank you so very much. And I'll stop here for questions if there are any. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Doc. I think there's a better context for the question Auntie Sheila was trying to bring our minds to. So Doctor has helped us to situate the numbers that the framework gave to us in a better perspective. So how are these assessments felt in the communities? How are people really connecting to what the figures are saying? Once again, please go to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that others will know that we are here, and then you'd also spread the word, and then we get a more better followers so that we spread this news. So before we come to another angle to this conversation, I think we've been sitting down for a while. We just want to have a short break, just 10 minutes break. So So maybe as much as possible, we'll try to hide our snack from the online participants. So come into practice as we live. So we would want to invite Mrs. Sheila Minka Premo, the convener of the Affirmative Action Coalition, and also she is a legal practitioner, to also throw more light on the cultural and social underpinnings of some of these conversations and the efforts that the coalition is doing to make sure that we have the bill passed into law as soon as possible. Let's welcome her with a round of applause.
Thank you very much. And hello to everybody here again. And I think before I start, I'd like to congratulate CDD for their 25th anniversary. We are very proud of the achievement, the fact that we are all parts of it. Congratulations to them. We wish them better years ahead where they can impact policy. So I think that, I believe most of what I have to say has been said already. In Regina's opening statements, in Dr. Atre's presentation. But I'll just add a few things. I have a longish PowerPoint, but I'm just going to pick on a few issues because I believe that they will make the presentation available. So I've been asked to talk about ensuring pluralism and inclusion of women, the role of the AA Bill Coalition in pushing for advocacy. So as indicated, I'm here representing the AA Bill Coalition. I'll make a few introductory remarks, some background information. We will not have time to have an overview of the bill. That's too much. But I believe that in the same room, some of you have been here a few times when we've taken you through the actual bill. This is, and then some proposals for the way forward. The next slide, please. So as we've heard from the beginning, from the presentation, we heard from the Global Center for Pluralism. Pluralism, inclusion is very important. A good nation is built by people of both sexes, and that is, men and women. We need to have equal numbers when it comes to leadership. We need inclusion to ensure real and sustainable development in Ghana. So I think somebody mentioned, I think Joyce in one of her remarks indicated, or in one of the presentations, that we all look at Rwanda and they said it's now touted as the cleanest city, cleanest country in Africa. Why is that so? When it comes to the gender division of labor in the home, who's responsible for cleaning the home? It is women. And so when the women are so many in leadership there, what do you expect? So it's not a big surprise. So as I think the doctor indicated in her presentation, there are lots of benefits of the bill, which we should be highlighting more when we are making presentations. And I believe that we haven't really gone far in our democracy due to the exclusion of women from governance and decision-making positions. And we needed to address this thing to ensure that we have inclusive growth. Women are discriminated against in governance and in decision-making positions. That is, in governance as well as in the private sector. You heard the findings from Ghana. When it comes to boards, when it comes to senior management positions, the higher you go in many institutions, the less women that you find. And that is having a very negative impact on us. So the Affirmative Action Bill is aimed at enacting a gender equality law that will ensure inclusion, particularly of both sectors in Ghana. There have been several, in terms of the history of the Affirmative Action law that we are talking about, there have been several, historical attempts. The first one of which was in 1960, which brought 10 women to parliament. So if in 1960, when we became a republic, it was seen as very important to bring women into leadership, I mean, we should have gone far by now. Due to the coup d'etats, etc., that we had, that whole thing became this thing. There have been several fluctuations since the first coup d'etat we had in 1966. And we had the statistics now, which is only 14.5%. 1960 till now. I mean, people who were born in 1960 are how old now? So you can see that the journey, we've been going too slowly. And that's, I think, Regina indicated. If we go at this pace, we don't know when we're going to get there. The next slide, please. So there's a lot of research which has shown that there's gender imbalance in several spheres of life in Ghana. And there's a provision in our constitution which allows for affirmative action, which we are relying on. There are some existing policies on affirmative action, but they've not been strong enough to stem the tide. The next slide, please. So what is affirmative action that we are talking about? It's defined in the bill itself defines it as the act of supporting or recommending a course or course of action to remedy an imbalance, recognizes the historical wrongs, and makes room for remedial action to be undertaken to remedy the wrong. In this case, when it comes to gender inequality, it's a temporary measure intended to produce particular results against identified targets within a certain time frame. One of the fears people have expressed when it comes to this bill is that, A, the women will overtake the men. And that is what, when you're talking about Rwanda, it's positive. But I remember I was in Parliament once at one of their breakfast meetings, and their concern was, if this law is passed, how will we make sure that we don't become like Rwanda? Because, in Rwanda now, the women, particularly in Parliament, are about 60%, 60+%. So that is one of the biggest fears that they have about it. But the way this law is couched, it's a program. It will have a series of programs, and it will make sure that where there's parity, then it will stop. So like I said, the purpose of the recent attempt is to make sure that we pass a law in line with Article 17.4 of our Constitution. I'll look again at it when I'm looking. So the question is, do we really need an affirmative action gender equality law for Ghana? The memorandum says that it's a bill to redress areas of social, economic, and educational, and then political imbalance. It aims at eliminating discrimination and calls for equal opportunity for both men and women. That's for inclusion. So it is a law which will ensure that we have inclusion. And I believe that there are enough justifications. I think I have about 5 justifications, which we all need to know. I'll quickly run through. So there's a need to address the marginalization of women in public and economic life. As we have heard, in our last population census, I mean for a long time, even the previous one, women outnumber men in Ghana. But when it comes to leadership, our numbers are very few. And this is not right, both at Parliament as well as the district level. I hear at the district level, when it came to the election, I think it was even, the percentage is less than 5. It's about 5% at the last election. There's another one coming up in October. Please, let's all join voice to make sure that the numbers increase, because it's not good at all. Parliament is 14.5. District Assembly is worse. So in terms of a Parliament is like a lens through which most people, there's this inter-parliamentary union ratings that they do. Ghana hasn't really done very well. So look at the highest we've had, I hear, was in 1965. It was 18.2%. That means that after they saw in 1960 that women can also govern, in 1965, people voted for a lot of women, and they had 18.5%. But unfortunately, by the following year, there was a coup d'etat, so that was the end. Ghana, we've never gone beyond that percentage in 65 before. The next slide. When it comes to ministerial appointments, it's the same. I think currently the cabinet ministers, cabinet ministers are 19 out of the ministers that are appointed. This is based on the Constitution. And currently, I think out of them, there are about 4 or 5 who are women. At the judiciary, it's not, if you look at the judges who are the highest when it comes to the judicial, at the judicial service level where you have the typist and this thing, there are plenty of women. If you go there, they are swimming all over the place. But when you go higher, then the numbers become less. They are less in terms of all the judicial. The numbers are increasing slowly. And we know that when it comes to the chief justices, since we gained independence, there have been so many, more than 20 men, but we've had 2 women in recent history. Now there's a push to have a 3rd woman. I hope that she's successful in her bid. But I can imagine there are also some men vying for the position. Okay? Pardon me. Oh, you want to get there? Okay. So why do we have what we call the marginalization of women? Many things. The gender division of labor in the home. So there's very little time for women to have time to go and do things. For most women who are here, especially those who have children, etc., I guess most of you have to wake up at about 4 a.m. to organize and put things in order before you come here. The patriarchal and patrimonial systems that we have, men's leadership, where people are brought up that it's only men who have a right to become leaders. So the woman who tries to be, they have all kinds of names that they give to you, whatever. Then the negative sociocultural practices and beliefs. I always say that, if you go around a room and you ask, from your ethnic group, what are some of the things that you are told between men and women? For instance, the Akan one, which I'm more familiar with, they say that Obatu Tua, Obaton, Atudru, so many of them, it is so many of them. And these are all things which are said and passed on to indicate that women don't have a right to be in leadership. Then when it comes to education, if you look at the demographics in Ghana, those with the, when it comes to literacy numbers, majority of them are women as compared to this thing. And then religious barriers as well. In some of the religions, the major religions, women, it is the men who are in the lead. Okay? Then in terms of resources, because women are, have a lot of responsibility when it comes to childcare in Ghana here. And then not all relationships are there meant to support them, etc. They will sell their last cloth and everything. So it's difficult for women to amass the kind of money needed to be able to push for particularly political positions, etc. When it comes to, then the nature of party politics in Ghana is very robust. I am not strong enough to go and stand on any parliamentary seat. No, seriously, I can't, because the stories you hear are so many, and I mean, it's terrible. But the key thing is that we don't have legislation. Yeah, people think that I talk very loudly sometimes, but by nature, I'm not a very strong person, I believe. And I don't think I can be able to go and stand out there. You need an extra tough woman to go and stand there. And I know myself, and I know I can't fit that criteria, And then for us, the key thing is that if we had legislation that made it mandatory, we would have reached there. So that's one of the gaps which the law is supposed to come and meet. Please, the next slide. Then we have the constitutional argument. I hinted at Article 17. Our constitution, 1992 constitution, says that, first of all, Article 17 says there should be no discrimination on the basis of gender. But then Article 17.4 has special provisions. It says that nothing in this article shall prevent Parliament from enacting laws that are reasonably necessary to provide for implementation of policies and programs aimed at redressing social, economic, or educational imbalance in Ghanaian society. So it recognizes that, yes, don't discriminate, but then if it is found that there's gender discrimination in particular these areas, there's nothing wrong if Parliament passes a law to be able to right the wrong, to balance it. So it is one of the pillars that we stand on. Again, we have Article, please, the next slide. We have Article 35. Okay. Hey, some of us were born before computer. Come and tell me. This is the one that's now. Okay. Yeah, I'm a BBC, but I'm trying. Born before computer. So Article 35.5 and 35.6.2 of our Constitution also says that the state has to actively promote the integration of the peoples of Ghana and prohibit discrimination and prejudice on the grounds of place of origin, circumstance of birth, ethnic origin, gender, religion, creed, and other beliefs. The rest are all some of the exclusion things which the research has brought out. But in our Constitution, I mean, it says that they're supposed to try to address it. Inclusiveness. So this clause in the Constitution calls for inclusiveness. Okay? Okay. Then 6 follows up. It says, towards the achievement of sub 5, the state shall take appropriate measures to achieve reasonable regional and gender balance in recruitment and appointment to public office. So we have information or provisions in our Constitution which calls for addressing the imbalance. Again, the Constitutional Revision Commission and then the white paper that came out of it calls for the enactment of an affirmative action bill and provides timelines. But we all know what happened to the white paper. When it came in, nothing much has happened. And then, yeah. Another set of arguments is based on the international obligations, which was also been hinted at. Ghana is a state party to several international instruments which calls for it to ensure inclusion. We have CDD, which was mentioned, Article 7, calls for ensuring that both men and women have equal access to election in public bodies, and then so it allows for affirmative action. Then there are other CDD committee recommendations as well. They all elaborate more. We have the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which identified 12 critical areas of concern to be addressed to ensure gender equality around the world. This was in 1995. And one of the critical areas is women empower and decision making. And it calls for equality. And it has strategies in it to ensure that you get there. Am I supposed to point here or there? Okay. Then we have the Sustainable Development Goals of 2015, Goal 5, which you've already heard of, which is titled Achieve Gender Equality and Empower All Women and Girls. And it focuses on gender equality and calls for parity for the year 2030. We've been told, for those of us who are doing advocacy on this bill, we've been told that, the way you see the structure of the bill, we are supposed to achieve parity by 2030. But so it starts off with 30%, 40, etc., etc. But we are in 2023 now. We have how many more years to 2030? So if we don't hurry up and get this law passed, then they have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. It also calls for equality before the law. Article 18 calls for state parties to ensure removal of discrimination against women and children. And then we have, there's the African Union Agenda 2063. It calls for parity to be achieved by 2063. How many of us will be alive by 2063? It is my least favorite provision, but you have to mention it. It says there should be equality by 20. So I think that, I don't know, what are the African Union leaders think that? They want to see it far away when they are all gone, and then it's our children who see that is done, etc., etc. Then, okay, I didn't even mention the Protocol to the African Charter on the Rights of Women. I think Article 19 of that also calls for state parties to ensure equality. Then the fourth set of arguments we have is that people will say, there are policies, the National Assembly, when it comes to government appointees. Is it 40 or 30% are supposed to be women? It's gone between 40 and 30. It shows you that when it comes to policies, any government that comes can change things. With policies, you don't have to go to parliament to go and pass your policies. It's this thing. So we are saying that the policies alone are not enough. Yes, girl child education thing is there, and a few other things, but it's not been very effective, and it can be changed easily. Then the fifth set of arguments we have to justify the need for the law is lessons from other African countries. And we are saying that several African countries have achieved gender equality in governance, especially, increasing numbers in parliament through laws. They use legislation to get there. The key one we always say is Rwanda, South Africa, Kenya, Ethiopia, Guinea-Conakry. Recently, Sierra Leone, even another name, Senegal. They've all arrived there through the use of legislation. And then, as was indicated earlier, it says it makes economic sense to achieve gender equality. Remember what Dr. Atre indicated, that your GDP goes up if there's gender equality. Because you bring the people. Somebody said, if you don't have gender equality, it's as if you have two legs, but you've held one back, and you want to run. Can you run? Yeah, so that's the pictorial to show that. It's very important. So basically, the bill seeks to provide an accountability framework for measuring gender equality and empowerment of women at the executive, legislative, judiciary, public, and private sectors. Okay? And then the memorandum also looks at some of the things I've already said. Like I said, so it's looking at a minimum of 30% to equality of 50 by 2030. So I believe that there's enough justification in the law for us to have it in place. And I hope that you all agree with me. In terms of the journey so far, in terms of this particular bill, in 2011, the then Ministry of Women and Children, which is now the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, sets up a committee to sort of undertake research and make proposals for the law. They were made up of multi-sectoral people, ministries, political parties, representatives from academia, CSOs. I was there as a CSO member. We did a lot of work, secondary, set up, we call it the technical committee, did some research, went to the 10 regions to talk to people, and then the proposals were put together into the bill. The first draft of the bill came out in 2013. Since then, there have been several others. In 2016, it actually went to Parliament, but it went to Parliament in October 2016. I've heard a conspiracy theory. They said that the government knew that there was going to be elections in December 2016, so they took it in October, knowing that by December 2016, it would be dead. And since then, it hasn't gone back in there. So there's 20, the one we have access to is 2020. The ministry will be telling us why we haven't seen the 2021 and 2023 one, because they have it, but they've not made it available. But today, one of the resource persons says that, make it available so that we'll talk about it and make inputs, etc. So please, after I finish the ministry camp, ask them, where is it? In 2021, when Madame Adjoa Safu came, she did a 2021 one, signed it. You know, normally every minister has to sign the bottom of the bill before it goes. So when they come, they always withdraw and sign and send it back. I understand that our honorable minister who has just come in has also signed the 2023 one. We want to see it. Ministry, we want to see it so that we can all work together on it. So as my colleague Gloria, who came and did the solidarity, indicated that we came together as a group in 2019 because we realized that, like a broom, if you stand alone, you can't sweep. If you come together, then you can work together. So we have been trying to coordinate activities of civil society to ensure the passage of the draft bill into law, provide knowledge materials and share information, undertaking advocacy activities, tracking and updating stakeholders on the bill, and then pushing for the passage of the bill. So membership is very wide, lots of people, including CDD has, as of last year, they've also come on board and they have been of immense support to us. And we are very grateful to them. And what has held us back in, it was interesting to see Dr. Tre showing what should be done with the advocacy. Unfortunately, from 2019, all of us, the work I've been doing is as a volunteer. You understand? Using my office, etc., etc. We hadn't had dedicated money to enable us to once we do a few things, somebody will support us here and there, when they will volunteer, etc. But also, thanks again to CDD, through CDD and Abantu, last year in their request for funding from the EU, they included affirmative action. So hopefully from next month, we'll have something. So I think you'll hear more about us. It takes money to do advocacy. If you want to go and lobby parliamentarians and this thing, can you take them and then tell them that, thank you, it doesn't happen that way. So with the little resources, you'll hear more about that. I know people say, it's been there for years, what have you been doing? When people have given us little resources, we've managed to do a few things, but with a little more resources, we are hoping that we can do more. We have a strategy meeting in 2021, and we have a lot of materials that, so we've done a lot of things, press conferences, holding workshops, lobbying the executive and legislator, identifying some gender champions, and some are males. We have some male champions because we realize that we cannot do it alone, and we need men to help us as well. And then reaching out to people of all generations. We've had a number of intergenerational workshops. When these laws come, me, at the age I've reached, I'm not going to benefit much, but it is our children, the young people here, who are going to benefit. So we've also been meeting them to hear their views and get their inputs. We've done some training for some journalists, etc. And then we have a few young people who've been doing social media advocacy for us, Twitter, Facebook, etc. But like I said, without much money, it was difficult to oil and incentivize them to do these things. But I think that the money will help us a little bit so you hear more about us, instead of hearing about us only when you come to these workshops. Okay, like I said, I'm not going to give a full level view, but just in case there's anybody here who hasn't seen. Is there anybody here who hasn't seen the affirmative action bill? Is there anybody here? Please don't feel shy. My time is up. Okay. There's a soft copy available. If you ask CDD, the last meeting that we held here, we shared it to people. It's available. Every bill is made up of two documents. There's a memorandum which explains things, and the provisions of the bill. The memorandum is in simple language, if you get access to it. If you don't have a copy, I'm sure if you indicate your registration sheet, they can send a soft copy of the 2021 that we have to you. Until the ministry gives us the latest, then we can also share it to you. It provides the justification for the law, historical antecedents, and an overview of the contents of the law. The provisions are set out in the law itself. As I said, it is a bill to address gender inequality. When it comes to affirmative action, you can do it in several areas: racial discrimination, disability, etc. This particular law is targeted at addressing gender equality. So it's affirmative action in brackets, gender equality law. And then, so it has 36 sections covering several things: principles of gender equality and equity. Then there's supposed to be a body that will do the monitoring and implementation, Gender Equality Committee. It's called Affirmative Action and Gender Equity and Equality in Governance Institutions. It mentions all: Executive, Council of State, etc., Judiciary, and the legislature. etc. It calls for gender-responsive budgeting in sectors of government, political parties and gender equity and equality, gender equity in trade unions, private employment, miscellaneous provisions, etc., etc. And every law has the short title and the long title. The short title is Affirmative Action Gender Equality Bill. The long title is An Act to Provide for Gender Equality in Public and Private Life in a Sustained and Systematic Manner and to provide for related purposes. So I'll jump all the provisions because there are a lot, and Joyce will soon ask me to stop talking. But I'd just like to just point out Section 24 is a part that deals with, because we're all interested in political participation. The 40 women out of the 275, we are not happy, we want to see a change. But if you read the provisions of the law, you wonder if it will take us there. It is one of the weakest parts of the law. So it says that political parties have to adopt effective measures that include information and financial resources to support the candidature of women in party politics and to serve in leadership positions in political parties. Then the EC is to use its organs to reach a consensus for the implementation of progressive gender parity in voluntary compliance of affirmative action. And this is reflected in manifestos and codes of conduct. They are supposed to submit annual reports to the EC, and those who meet the standard will receive, so these are the incentives. So they will receive protocol services. That means when they are traveling, they don't go through the normal places where we travel in, but they will receive VIP services. And then when it comes to the punishment, the stick, it says that enforcement is to be by the withdrawal of support in kind provided by the Electoral Commission with funds from the government. How much money does the Electoral Commission give to political parties? And then it says that state protocol services will also be withheld. You know, when they are going, once you're a politician, it doesn't matter who you are, you can have 2 members. When you are going somewhere, you can always ask for state protocol services. You are traveling, you get the police heading you, etc., etc. So some are very strategic. You won't get those services. Is that enough for you to feel that you should comply with the law? People think that these the sanctions are not effective enough. Yeah, so it is a part of the law that needs to be strengthened. Okay? Okay. Okay. So there are several, but then there's a schedule. As part of the schedule, this is, I'm working with the 2021. That's the one I have seen Philly, until I'm giving the other one. So it was supposed to be between 2020 and 2023. Then from 24 to 27, we'll have 35%, 28 to 30. So I'm sure that schedule has changed. Now that we have a more latest, it should have changed. And then they're supposed to present annual reports, etc., etc. in there. There's a schedule to there are some strategies at the back which indicates what should be done, guidelines and strategies, etc. Okay, so a few issues relating to the bill. One of the key issues is the implementation body. So in the early drafts, the 2013 drafts proposed an independent body called the Gender Equality Commission, which will be responsible, like a standalone body that will be totally dedicated to this work. But the ministry indicated that, the bill belongs to the ministry. They prefer a committee within the ministry that will do the implementation. That has been an issue up and down, whatever. People think that seeing to it that something like the military complies, it will regard somebody who has dedicated time. Because the ministry is a very big ministry. But now that's what the bill has. So that's one of the issues. People also think that there are too many institutions that have a role to play in it. And then they also think that, as I said, the provision dealing with gender equality with political parties is not strong enough. The penalties also proposed are also not strong enough, according to others. Oh, sorry. And, okay. But we are of the view that it doesn't matter what the problems are. Have you changed the thing for me? We have the view that even if it has a few weak parts, it should still pass. Because Ghana is lagging behind. All these countries that look up to Ghana, Ghana is supposed to be, our president is supposed to be the gender champion. You understand? Many countries have passed us. So we really wonder why we are where we are. So we are saying that we've heard that the 2023 version is in cabinet, still waiting for approval. Okay. my young people, maybe just leave me where I am now. Don't do the PowerPoint. So, and like I said, one of the challenges we've had has been with funding to enable us to, so I said we all have a role to play to make sure that this law comes into being, because Ghana has. And then I recently had a meeting with the UN Women team, a team that came from to come and see what we are doing. And one of the things they said was that the law is too big. They said that when they saw the law, they were like, why is the law so big? And they said in other African countries, the laws are smaller. So what they suggested was that if it is possible, one strategy we can do is to break it maybe into 3 parts. One dealing with political participation, one dealing with maybe the public sector, then another one dealing with the private sector. And the one we need now, before 2024, is what? Political participation, so we can run with it. And they actually showed us a sample, which I'll share with the ministry, a sample from Senegal. They call it the parity law. It was 1 page. Okay, it was in, the graphics, the formatting was tight. So let's say 2 pages. So that's something that we would like to, when we meet the ministry, we'll consider that. Is it possible now, because of that big book, any law that goes to parliament and is very big, it takes a very long time. So if we think that political participation is so key, can we just pick those parts into another small, succinct law and run with it? Hopefully, then it would pass. It will pass only if our parliament... Oh, young man, you're worrying me. I'm going to finish. Okay. So like I said, proposals for the way forward. Like I said, one of our biggest challenges are doing with funding, which, like I said, through our partner CDD, we are grateful for. There's also been frequent changes in the minister for gender. I think since 2011, there have been about 7 or 8 ministers, if you count. And, in each one, when they come, they have several issues to address. So they look at, things they should make a priority. You have to make a lot of noise before they make these things a priority. So that's a big thing. But the good thing is that the current minister used to be a deputy minister, whom we've met many times to speak to about this bill. So we believe that she's making this bill her priority, and we'll be behind her to make sure that it happens. Sorry. I should have changed my APO. The APO has become a little... I was told that in around March 2020, this year, they've taken the newer one. And we would like Cabinet to give it a priority and to push it for the bill to pass into law. Anyway, so the long and short, I won't waste anybody's time, is that we're once again very grateful for the partnership with CDD. It's yielding a lot of benefits for us. At least it's making some resources available to enable us to run. But I believe that everybody in this room has a role to play when it comes to this bill. If we think it is important enough, if we think it will positively affect our economy. Right now, our economy is not doing well, right? If we think it will positively affect our women who are in the markets, these are market women. They're able to balance things. Sometimes you wonder, somebody is just selling tomatoes, but she's able to take her children to school. And if the women are also sitting out there in areas of leadership, with our little resources, I believe that they will have a big voice to say. So it is in all of us our interest to ensure that we reach. So inclusion is important. It enables people of different sexes to bring their perspectives to bear and to ensure better and sustained development. So we need inclusion, we need pluralism, we need to have the bill passed. So our slogan is, pass the affirmative action bill now. Please join me. Pass the affirmative action bill into law now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Auntie Sheila. I think I just love the way we are migrating from one point to the other in terms of creating the context for this conversation. So we've seen how our social beliefs, our attitudes, cultural underpinnings shape some of these conversations. And Auntie Sheila has been graceful enough to take us through the journey of the coalition and then some of the basis for some of the demands they are making. And then for me, one of the critical aspects of her presentation was the mention of the state. So when we talk about division of labor, as she said earlier on, when it comes to the home, we have division of labor, where women are ascribed to certain norms and certain duties in the home. So when it comes to development, we have stakeholders, and then we ascribe certain roles to them. So that's how come the next presenter is a government official. And then, as the Constitution indicates, the state has a role. So this is not just a platform for us to sort of pull you and then frown our faces on you as the state, but we just want to understand what is happening. We just want to know, as Auntie Sheila said, if Auntie Sheila doesn't have access to the 2022-2023 bill, then I don't know, I don't even want to think about what's happening as a young person standing here. So I would like to invite Mrs. Faustina Champon, the Director of Gender at the Ministry, just to come and have a conversation with us, the current status of the bill, so that we know how we can strategize in coming to support the ministry to have it done.
Thank you. What's the first name? Thank you, Madam MT Joyce. Good afternoon, everyone. I think I have already been introduced, but I'll again introduce myself. My name is Faustina Champon, and I am, as introduced, the Director for the Department of Gender, which is under the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection. And I'm here on behalf of the main ministry. I send you greetings from management, including the honorable ministers, the chief director, and other directors of the ministry. And on their behalf, I do make this brief statement. Can we have, is that the, yeah, so can you let us go to page 20? Auntie Sheila has done my work for me. From, can we go up? Or it's, oh, I have to. Recently at 10:50, so I'm also getting here too. So I had what Auntie Sheila presented. And of course, I have to confirm that all that she's doing, she's not alone. She has the support of the ministry. And we are doing this together. So I'll skip the first 19 slides and move to page 20, where we have the status of the affirmative action bill, which I have been requested here to share with you. So to add to what Auntie Sheila just presented, now after developing the document, there is now the need for us as a ministry to lead the rest of Ghanaians to present the bill to cabinet. And as she said, in 2016, November, we managed as a ministry to complete the document with 8 cabinet memorandum and submitted it to cabinet for consideration and further approval. Cabinet, however, couldn't complete the discussions on it, and there was, in 2020, there was a change of government because the 6th Parliament of the 4th Republic came to an end. With this, in 2017, the bill was again resubmitted to cabinet for the same purpose, for their consideration and further approval. When it went there, this time they were able to sit on it and they made some recommendations. So we needed to come back, and with the support of the coalition, we worked according to the requests that came from cabinet and resubmitted. One of the requests was that we needed to have a, can we go back? Yes, one of the requests was that we needed to have a communication and advocacy strategy attached to the bill. So we did both and resubmitted to cabinet. But again, there wasn't any show on it. We didn't also rest, we moved on. In 2020, as Auntie Shida said, we resubmitted the bill, led by our then Minister, Honorable Adjo Asafo. Then there was a break. For almost 1.5 years, we are not having any minister to lead us. But that notwithstanding, we had the then caretaker minister who led us as a ministry to resubmit the bill in 2021. But I think a cabinet has their rules that governs their operation. They need a minister and not a caretaker or a deputy. So they couldn't table the bill for discussion. I'm happy to say that now we have a full minister, 2023 onward. And this minister, this bill, affirmative action bill, is very dear to her. And it is one of her priorities or her agreements signed with the president. So according to her, which she has started, and we have seen signs, she is going to move every means to make sure that this bill, or the submission of this bill in her era, will be the last submission to cabinet. She will make sure that it is being tabled and moved from cabinet to parliament. And with this, last month, March, we submitted the, Auntie Shida will say the new version. Auntie Shida, we don't have a new version since 2021. All that, because we had all the work on the recommendations that came from the area discussions from cabinet. All that we do is just to change the name, the signature, and the reason. So we are not hiding anything from, especially from you. What we have there is what you also have. So please, let us keep this in mind. Yeah, so last March, we have resubmitted to cabinet, and it has been shared among the cabinet members, that is the ministers, for their attention and further consideration by them. And what we are now pushing with cabinet secretariat is for them to table the bill for discussion at their next cabinet meeting. And Auntie Shida, this time we work very, very closely. I'll be giving you a periodic update on what has been happening. So that when you go anywhere and we are not there, at least you can be our... Thank you. Okay, so with this, and knowing that we have various stakeholders that we are working with, we have developed a roadmap to make sure that all relevant stakeholders come on board for us to achieve what we are all pursuing. And so, the Honorable Minister, we have formed a committee on this bill at the ministry level, and we have come up with a roadmap. One, she has started engaging her colleague ministers at cabinet. So according to her, we had a meeting as part of discussion, she mentioned that when they have break or there's some free time, she goes to them to discuss the bill with them. And so most of them, especially the women, they are getting her support. And I think with this, we think it is a good start, because these same people, when it is being tabled, will discuss it for consideration and approval. We are also As part of the roadmap, we are also planning to meet with the Chief of Staff and then other leadership of Parliament. And we want to do this, especially the one with the leadership of Parliament, before even the bill goes to them. So that before it goes to them, they are already aware and the discussions on it will be less. We are also planning to have a meeting with the Women Caucus in Parliament. Again, we are meeting with our committee in Parliament, which is the Gender and Children and Social Protection Committee. We are also planning to have a meeting with the Senate Committee on Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. Again, a discussion or an engagement with the committee on, I've mentioned it. And then also, meetings with NGOs, CSOs, who are, I must say, our mouthpiece. That is the ministry's mouthpiece in pushing this agenda forward. What you can say as a ministry, we can say. What Auntie Shida can come and stand here and say, I cannot say. And so we are very happy, and that's the main reason for this particular important meeting. We are here in our numbers and we are participating fully. We want to liaise with you, CSOs, NGOs, any point in time, update you on the bill, and then when you go out, you can make the noise and then the advocacy on our behalf. We are also very certain that this year, as I have said earlier, we know the bill will move from cabinet based on the move that the current minister is taking. And I mentioned we are going to have a meeting with ABCD. Auntie Shida mentioned it. These all come with resources, both technical and financial. And that's the main reason today we are also here to tell you this and see how best we can all come together and forge and get resources to have these engagements and make sure that the bill is finally passed into law. On these few notes, I say thank you.
Thank you very much for taking us through the mandate of the ministry when it comes to making sure the bill is passed. So, Auntie Sheila, there is no current version. The only difference is that you don't have the current minister's signature, and then we have the previous date on it. So maybe for Auntie Sheila to be a bit not worried, you share the current version that has the minister's signature and the new date with her so that she won't be worried anymore. Thank you very much. On this note, I think we've gotten enough information, enough data to bring on board our diversity. So we have Rajville take us through the global assessment in trying to measure diversity and inclusion. And then we have Dr. AC trying to walk us through the implication of these assessments, because at times the figures are much more understood and appreciated when it comes to how it touches us, how we feel as people. And then we had Auntie Sheila come to let us appreciate the efforts that civil society is doing to make sure that we have a legal framework that we can use as an accountability tool in trying to demand for inclusion and diversity. And then we have Madam Faustina come to express the state's mandate in ensuring that these things are done. Because as individuals, we know that there are certain things that we can't do as individuals in a particular state. So if the Constitution is graceful enough to mandate the state to take certain actions, it's important that we take that as a point of advocacy and insist and demand the state to do whatever it's mandated to do by the Constitution. So within this specific context, if there are suggestions, because we just want to prioritize the issues. We are here to ensure that the affirmative action bill is passed within the minimum frame of time. So we are drafting our strategies. We are shaping the information that we are having, because as Auntie Sheila said, there's been certain steps that the coalition has taken in trying to enhance people's knowledge when it comes to the affirmative action. And for me, one of the most important things that Auntie Sheila noted and then Dr. AC mentioned is the need for us to start thinking about the bill as a tool for economic empowerment, as a tool for economic gains. So maybe we should be inspired to give notes as the AA Bill Coalition, as CDD tries to shape the conversation in demanding for the passage of this bill. So we are open for, we want to have a frank conversation. Even Auntie Fosti was frank enough to tell us that they want us to make noise about this bill. So this is a safe space that we can share our ideas, a safe space that we want to shape what the AA Bill Coalition is doing, what CDD is doing, and even what the assessment is offering as a tool for our advocacy. So the floor is opened. If you have any question in relation to the speakers as well, you can raise the question as well.
All right. Hello. Hello. Yeah, hello. Thank you very much. Hello. Okay, thank you very much for all the nice presentations that we have witnessed, which shed light on the purpose for being here and why we need to push this bill to get to wherever it has to be. And my name is Joseph Wemako. A seasoned journalist and activist, and who doubles as the founder and executive. So I just want to find out from Madam Faustina, during your presentation, you mentioned that currently at where we have reached, there will be a next session where the bill will be sent to the Parliament. I just want to find out from you exactly when is that, so that we can follow up on that. Secondly, I also want to understand why they seem to be pushing this anti-gay bill before the Parliament with all doing what we are doing and not doing what is very important.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Journalist.
Members on the coalition bill, because for all these years, at times we get tired and we stop doing the advocacy and we stop. So with what I've heard now, I think that from tomorrow we'll keep the ground going. Thank you very much.
Okay, as we keep the ground going, I'll come to the young gentleman, to take shots.
I'm Chief Osman Moro Fukuyama, Women and Youth Development Association, the Executive Director. My is question and some information. One, you've given us a very good overview and informations about this action bill. Seriously, there are some of the presentation that you did, we may need it as civil societies, Because those information over there, if you are going to do advocacy, you want to engage people, there are some information you need to get to be able to do. So if you could make it, we have given your email so that we can get copies of those information. And the second issue is about not only Parliament. You see, there should be pressure from the community. There should be a lot of community engagement. You know, when the parliamentarians are coming, people must actually give them pressure. Because what is happening is like the women alone are doing their job. Moreover, in parliament, the numbers cannot match. So what can they do? When they talk, they can silence them. But if the community, you see, if the coalition can actually help us to get down to the community engagement, meet some traditional leaders. Because this bill, you go to the community, find out what is affirmative action bill. They don't know. We don't know. What is it? What is it? What is it as we are talking about that? They don't know the importance. Now, we've gotten some information. Seriously, what is supposed to be done. So if we have those and you're forced to engage so that we can engage a lot, let the community attack their MPs. This is what is at the, you can call for it. You see, with that pressure, by all means, they too will be calling. And it will get to the cabinet, and cabinet will definitely approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness. I think we will let Madam Fosti respond to the first question, and then the other.
Can I?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So he mentioned the why. The why question is why we are also here. We are here to find solution to the why question. We cannot decide for cabinet. And that is why, as I said, you are now our mouthpiece. Go and make the noise on our behalf. Then it will also push them to table, consider, approve, and then move from cabinet to parliament. For now, I can't say today or tomorrow because we don't work there. It is per their procedure that they are going to use. But as I said, when they hear the noise now, it will push them to also attach importance to it for them to decide on. So let us all hope that this time our noises will be cared more for it to influence them to also work on it on time for it to move from cabinet to parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much. He has no idea, yeah. And then I think what Auntie Fosti is trying to let us understand is the fact that even if the ministry has submitted the bill, it's not in their power to ensure that it moves from one state to the other. And that's where the Royal Highness's suggestion about letting the community attack, because this bill, as we are saying, is of benefit to the community people. So what if the people who need a bill come to the policymakers? We put you there. So as Gloria mentioned, if you don't see the bill, maybe 2024, women are not going to vote. I don't agree to that anyway, because even if you don't vote, some people will vote and then we still be there. We need to make informed decisions. So how do we make sure that we get the traditional leaders, youth, at all levels, to make sure you're a journalist? How do you make sure that you are giving pressure to these people? You've heard from the ministry that, and I think, Auntie Fosti, we can stand anywhere and quote that you said the bill is with cabinet. This is public information. So what is cabinet doing? We've heard that the bill is here. We need, and then one of the things about having some of these conversations is the need to incite the community, need to inspire citizen involvement in some of these policy frameworks. Okay, so as a journalist, maybe your point of call from this meeting will be that what is Cabinet doing? Because the Director of Gender said that the bill is before them. So we need to know, even if they are not sitting on it, they should just let us know, when is it going? When are they even sitting on it? The question you pose to Auntie Fosti, you can pose to Cabinet. Please, the next round of questions.
Could I
Sure.
add something to what the two questions have been, just some comments, just from an outsider's perspective, and just drawing upon experiences from different countries, from North America, from the US. Just as someone looking from the outside in here, I find the theme that we're seeing in a lot of different countries, it's easier to mobilize people for bills on hate and fear, unfortunately, when we're looking at diversity and inclusion. It's easier, unfortunately, to get support that we're seeing as a trend to take away rights than give them. And it's not just in Ghana, it's everywhere. So even as somebody just learning about what's happening on the LGBTQ plus issue here and the affirmative action bill, even if it's a private member's bill, it sadly isn't surprising to me that it's going so quickly and it might change, whereas this one has been sitting here from 2011. And it's, like we said, it's so important to bring those issues to light and to notice a difference. It's not easy conversation, I know, in Ghana. I know it isn't. And it's even in North America, everyone thinks it's so progressive and is going backwards too now. So so that's something that we realized in the reports too. But especially about the other point about the mobilizing people to work with government, to make your government do things for you. What happened in Colombia, and I use this as an example, and hopefully we can connect some organizations, Afro-Colombians elected a black female Afro-Colombian vice president for the first time in their history over 200 years. I know how they did that. People came from the tribal communities out in the territories, traveled 8, 10, 20 hours to put their vote in by boat, by going through narco territories, like to put their safety at risk. And they were saying enough of 200 years of not being represented by these governments, being victim to paramilitaries, being victim to the narco traffickers, being victim from FARC. We've had enough. And that is such an example. And I know they're opening now embassies and diplomatic relations now. So when we told them we were coming to Ghana, they were so excited because now the government wants to open those relations. But that, for me, that's an example. And hopefully, like with this new network, we can connect some of these works because it's possible. There's little hope. It's still very difficult everywhere, but I just wanted to share that.
Maybe Angela will just have to talk to you more about how to learning those strategies in dealing with the government, apart from the 2-pager that you want to do. Maybe, so.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gladys, and I'm representing Hope for Future Generations. Thank you very much for all the brilliant presentations. Auntie Sheila, in your presentation, you made some recommendations. And one of those recommendations was that, is it possible for us to focus this bill on political parity? Now the bill is in cabinet. What can we do if we really want to re-strategize to focus on political parity like the other African countries have been able to do? My second concern is that, Auntie Fosti, you said that at the ministry level, you have a committee that works on this bill. And I would like to know if the committee can be opened up so that we can have reps from the coalition that is working on the affirmative action bill, so that at a particular point in time, we all have the same information and we are speaking to it the same way. I believe if we do it this way, it will go a long way to help us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Pascal Hassan Edwards. I'm a youth development worker coming from National Youth Authority. And I have really appreciated the concept we are all discussing, pluralism and inclusion. And for me, it means that whatever action that we want to take, we should look at all who are necessary for the action to be effective and the objective realized. And here I want to share the perspectives of the youth. Once we are talking about pluralism, which the youth constitute a part, and then inclusion, which they are also involved, I think that this affirmative action bill that we are all advocating, they should also be part of it and own the process. There are certain phrases since I came this morning, I've heard things, even though with the youth in mind, but it's like, let's build a legacy for the youth. Such a phrase should be, let's build a legacy with the youth, instead for the youth. And then another thing, we can have our kids come and enjoy. We should rather let our youth enjoy from now till they grow to enjoy. All that I'm trying to say is that we should involve the young people right from the beginning, even if we have them in mind that in future they will benefit from it. They should be part of the process. We are looking at the marginalization of women, the political leadership. The youth are equally marginalized. If you go to parliament now, fortunately, Ghana, our age bracket for youth is very wide, 15 to 35. But even this, we have 4 members of parliament who are youth. And if we use 2021 as a base year, there were 6 then, by the age of 35. But now we have 4. And I will even say that it's the female counterpart that have even added to the youth, because there are 3 and only 1 male. So I think if we involve the youth in the advocacy process for the affirmative action, even at parliament, we can increase their representation so that we achieve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. I think we will let Auntie Sheila and Auntie Fosti take it. And then your point is quite interesting, because as we are looking at the segmentations of even our issues and concerns, when it comes to the youth, we know that, and then with this contest, I'm beginning to go back to my organization, whom I'm representing here. But one of the strategies that we use to work is the fact that on a table where you find the elderly, who are the policymakers, you try to appeal to the conscience of the policy. So you are not saying that the youth. Why we use that phrase is the fact that we want you to connect to the fact that your child will have a better future. So when you go to other spaces, then we want to say that the youth are building. So Aunt Sheila mentioned that the coalition has had intergenerational dialogues with young people and the old people coming to the same set to understand and even interrogate these issues. But thank you very much for bringing this to our fore. Aunt Sheila, please.
I think the discussion to one of the challenges that was also noted was trust or mistrust. Even though we are advocating for affirmative action, there have been some suggestion that sometimes women themselves fight against their own. And just this morning, I was listening to a program on one of the radio stations where a lady was sharing an experience that she was about getting a job as a brand, ambassador of a company, which was established by a man and a wife. But later on, the man came and said that, no, I don't want you to employ this lady because the way she is, I don't know what will go on between you and the lady. And the man told her, oh, I would have loved to employ you, but this is the reason I don't want to go home, and then there will be a problem. So she had to be giving some money to go, because there is of trust. And I asked myself, even if the man wanted to have an affair with the woman, couldn't he do it without even employing the lady? So the trust issue in championing for position for some women, we should be mindful of that.
Hello. Sorry, starting off with your last point. As for conflicts, it is between men, women, between men. It can happen at any time. Issues about if a wife feels threatened that the husband is partnering with a very beautiful woman, what is wrong with that? If she wants to draw his attention. So in terms of this whole thing about women their own enemies, etc., etc. How about men? Don't they also fight? I think that they may fight more than the women do. At the workplace, there's competition between men for positions, etc. Two men fight for women, etc. So please, don't let's bog our minds down with such things, because it's human beings by the nature of our interactions with each other. There's always bound to be some conflict, jealousy, resentment, etc. And it's not, I believe, it's not associated with women only. On the issue about the youth, I believe that when we are talking about women, we are not talking about grown-up women like myself. I mean, me, I've hit 60. You understand? It is women of all ages, from the time they are born. You know, there's data there which shows the kind of discrimination that children suffer. This particular bill, children in school, education, etc., their strategies at the back, etc. So it's talking about the females of all ages, including the youth. And they have been involved right from the beginning. In our Affirmative Action Bill Coalition, we have a lot of them, most of it, we have a social media committee, subcommittee. It's all full of young people who do these things. So I believe that they are on the table. You know, different laws are passed to address different issues. We have the youth policy. And I know there was a bill, youth bill, that was being discussed. In the same way, we have a disability, there's a policy on disability, there's a law on disability, and it's the only thing is that they didn't add the word affirmative action. But those were affirmative action to address disability. I believe that the youth bill is also supposed to address issues. So there are some things that sometimes they cut across, but this particular one is focused on gender equality between men and women of all ages. Okay, so let's look at it in that broad way, and not otherwise. If every constituency says they want to see a particular section dealing with it, it's very broad. If you have the chance to, I'm hoping that you get a copy of the bill. Very broad, dealing with everyone, you know, in there. And as has been indicated, if it actually gets passed, Ghana is going to be the beneficiary in terms of our development. And so I believe that and then I also indicated in my presentation that we've also involved, we've even had special workshops for them, allowed very young people to come and talk to us and their perspectives about the bill. And then I think my lady from the Hope for Future Generations mentioned the issue about the committee set up at the ministry. I think I would also join, you know, from 2011, that multi-sectorial team that was set up, the technical committee, is still there. Most of the drafts of the bill, at least the work done now up to 2020, whenever the minister goes to cabinet, they say, go and do this change, etc. They bring us together. So for me, I straddled two things. I was on the technical committee, and then I'm also part of the coalition. You understand? After the coalition, we are making noise. We want to make sure that this thing. But the technical committee is there. Technical people with skills. We help with the drafting, right from 2011 up to now. And she mentioned the 2018 one, when the then minister, Honorable Otiko, went. The president said he wanted to see a media, the communication strategy, and then an implementation strategy. I was part of the team. They took us to Ebri for 5 days to go and. They said the bill was too big. It should be reduced. Take out chieftaincy. Do this. We sat down for 5 days, working with the ministry to help them refashion it, develop the whatever, those strategies that he wanted, and gave it to her to take back in 2018 to cabinet. So we've always worked with them, of course. I mean, since for a while they've not called the technical committee. If they call us, we are more than ready to go and work with their internal committee. It is their bill. You understand? We come in to come and help if they call us. And like I said, we are available. So it's not necessarily even the coalition that they need to call. As for us, we'll go lobbying them. But the technical committee is available anytime they call us. In 2016, before the bill got passed by cabinet, the then minister, when she was, at that time, I don't know whether things have changed. When the thing goes to cabinet, they had a cabinet subcommittee on governance. For certain issues, they refer to them. So it's referred to them. When she was going to them, she took 3 of us from the technical committee to go with her to the cabinet subcommittee meeting. We did a PowerPoint presentation, like I've done on this thing, gave the committee members time to ask us questions. We answered all their questions. Even before we went there, we realized that we're told that there are some ministers who were anti-gender. We divided ourselves, went to see them in their offices, talked to them, and don't think that they are all men. Some of the perceived anti-gender people were women. And their view is that, we struggled and got here. So why are you trying to make it easy for some other woman? So it's not an automatic thing. We had to actually go one female, I'll mention the name, went to her office, told her, some of these marginalization issues, etc. She understood. So when they went to the committee subcommittee voted, they all agreed. And it went to, they reported back to the main big committee, cabinets. Then it was possible, and then it went to parliament. So we've told the minister, we are available. Some of us, I'm not saying it's necessarily me. We are available to help them if it is possible. Just so, if there's any feedback, we can help them quickly. And then when we finish, then they take it to Attorney General's office. They also have technical people there to polish the law. So I believe that working together has been long, and it is still available if we are on call to do that. Thank you very much.
Yes, so the committee I was referring to is a working committee at the ministry level. For the technical committee, just as Auntie Shida has said, we are together and we work together to achieve our goal. Thank you.
A spirit of working together. I don't know if there are any burning questions, if there is any suggestion. My lady, let's just take her and then we wrap up, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Livelyn Kunedu Asiedo, and the National Coordinator for the Ghana CSOs platform on SDGs. And in the last couple of weeks, our discussions with other civil society organizations have been strategies essentially trying to bridge the gap between girls and boys, women and men in the education field, in the economic sector. And one of the key things that is coming up is that for the years, as long as we keep a gentleman's agreement and then dialogue, we dialogue and then the politicians hear us and it ends there. So there is the need for us to be a bit radical and pragmatic in our approach to the issues that are burning so much in our backyard. And one of the, a few things or strategies that I have heard that may work, I want to share them here and see. During Ghana going to IMF, one of the conditionalities that Send Ghana put out there was that IMF, please audit Ghana or let Ghana report on its COVID-19 expenditure as a precondition to coming to IMF. And Ghana didn't have a choice than to tell us exactly what they did with our COVID money. At least we got something, and then it became a big noise in the country. Then the second one was that it's difficult to get IMF all the time, but if we can write an open letter to IMF, if we are not getting them to meet us, we can just write a letter, exactly what we want them to help us achieve, and then we put it out there in the air, and then they will pick it and then call us. Then the second issue is that it is the political season, and so our political parties are preparing their manifestos and all that. They will go and sign a social contract with NDPC on behalf of Ghanaians, and that is what will guide their implementation when they come into office. So what we can also do is to engage NDPC and ask them, this means so much to us. Can you make it a preconditionality in the manifestos of the political parties? And in addition to ourselves engaging the political parties to make sure that our request is in their manifestos. Then the third one is also the community empowerment that we have spoken about. I don't know much about the coalition and then what it has done, but I'm looking at the possibility of doing the miniature PowerPoint, I've forgotten its name, infographics. To do infographics and then share it with us. So when I say us, I mean the CSO's platform, because our platform is very big, and then we also give it to our members. When COVID came, what we did as civil society was to individual organizations using their own resources to do communication, and it went a long way to support what government was doing. And then today we can talk about the impact of COVID. And I believe in the same vein, if we have these infographics and then organizations take them as part of their community interventions, spend some 5 to 15 minutes educating their constituents on the need for the passage of the affirmative action bill, and then mandating them to demand same from their potential MPs or candidates who come to them, I think we'll be making progress. So these are my few suggestions, and I hope that we may be able to work with them. Thank you.
Yes, and I hope that after we close, you wait for us so that we meet and then we strategize on how we should use this tool. Thank you very much. So thank you everyone for sitting, and thank you for maybe before you give us, I will share my role, and you will give the closing remark. But I just want us to get this picture. Economy. We are talking about inclusive development. And then, since it's the duty of the woman to get pregnant, Auntie AC is pregnant, and then it's detected that she's pregnant with a male child. So she has that tool that will help us develop. So how do we ensure that she gives birth? So there should be roads that's leading to the hospital that she needs to go. There should be better antenatal services. There should be change in attitude of the females who are males, as Aunt Sheila said. There are some women who think otherwise. So there should be attitudinal changes in them to make sure that Auntie AC delivers that male child. And for me, this is what we are talking about. We all need to come on board to make sure that the bill is passed, because the bill is the pregnant woman. It's giving us that male child that we need to make sure that we develop as a community. So I will give it to you to give us the closing remark.
Of what we've done. I just actually didn't want to give formal, and then I can say thanks again, but just from an international perspective, what I've found is that if you look at trade agreements with other countries, including Canada, I was just Googling it while we were going through this, for instance, a country like Canada is considered a high-income country, and they're now making it part of their provisions. It's gender and international trade provisions. They do have a trade agreement with Ghana that has a feminist trade provision, and I think it'd be an interesting strategy for civil society here to look at these trade provisions, talk to high commissions and embassies and representatives here, and give the people who are voting on this bill some, again, that economic incentive. You know, if you start doing this, you'll get more trade money, you'll get more, you know, contracts with other international governments and trade agreements. So I think that's an interesting strategy I've seen some other people, some other countries use. We have seen a lot of success when you take this information and you go to the communities, the grassroots level, like you were talking about, in plain language. That has really helped in what we've seen. Again, this is just some examples from what I've seen. And again, the other point that you made also about making the bill shorter, that has helped in other countries too. I've seen it as well. You go from, for the ethnic chapter in Colombia, they had like 25 pages. They got 3 in the end. But the 3 held a lot of things accountable and a monitoring program with that. So even though they would have loved to have 25 pages, the 3 was still, you know, a step forward. So again, thank you very much for allowing the GCP to come into this discussion. I'm really open to talking about anything that an international organization can do to bring spotlight to this issue, even if it's social media posts, it's connecting partners, connecting with embassies or that we know. Please let me know, and thank you for your time, and thank you again, CDD-Ghana, for arranging this.
too much noise. Now we can sleep very well and then continue the job from here. Thank you very much. Thank you, Auntie Sheila, for always being there to champion this. We hope that we can fit into your big shoes in future. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you present here for helping us to have these wonderful discussions. All of us are advocates. We live here and we continue. We don't stop it. So we want the affirmative action bill to be passed now. Thank you very much.